This is hard to believe. From Billboard Chris, here's JD Vance being interviewed on, what is this, ABC. And this interviewer is attempting to gaslight the United States with this statement that she's talking about apartment buildings being taken over by Venezuelan gangs in Colorado. And she says, well, it's only a handful of apartment buildings that were taken over by. This is genuine propaganda. This is as naked an attempt to manipulate the public as you'll ever see. JD Vance, you'll see he can barely believe what he's hearing from this person, from this craven propagandist.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border. Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. I worry so much more about that problem than anything else here. We've got to get American communities in a safe space again. And unfortunately, when you let people in by the millions, most of whom are unvetted, most of whom you don't know who they really are, you're going to have problems like this. Kamala Harris, 94 executive orders that undid Donald Trump's successful border policies. We knew this stuff would happen. They bragged about opening the border, and now we have the consequences, and we're living with it. We can do so much better, but frankly, we're not going to do better, Martha, unless Donald Trump calls this stuff out. I'm glad that he did.
It's really like, we talk about it on this channel all the time. It feels like we're in Bizarro World or alternate universe or something. I woke up in an alternate universe today. Let's go back to the beginning there and hear what she says again.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
A handful of problems. Okay, the problems are, though, the problems she just mentioned are foreign criminal gangs taking over apartment buildings. Again, did I wake up in an alternate universe? How can this be real? How could the propaganda be so brazen? How could it be so naked? Look at the expression on her face. It's almost as if she believes it. I mean, who gave her that line, by the way? Did she come up with it by herself, or was it just handed to her by a producer? Probably a producer said, hey, this is the angle. It's only a handful of apartment buildings that were taken over by criminal gangs that were let into the country by the current regime. Only a handful. I mean, if you're going to have a society, if you're going to have a country, you've got to expect that Venezuelan gangs that you let into the country are going to take over apartment buildings. That's just a normal part of having a civilization. What the fuck? This is gaslighting beyond belief. Again, did she come up with that herself? I mean, look at her expression on her face there, as if what she just said makes any fucking sense, is in any way rational or sane. Let's go back to JD Vance's response here.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs.
Do you hear yourself? Do you hear yourself? Did she at that moment, like in the back of her head, some lonely, tiny cluster of neurons in the back of her head go, oh yeah, that is bad. In fact.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
I don't know, Joel Sargent. I don't know. You know what it is? It's propaganda. It is desperate propaganda. It's cynical propaganda. It's cynical propaganda that relies on the stupidity of the public. Right? You wouldn't say that if you had any respect for your audience. You wouldn't say that if you had any respect for the intellectual capacity of your audience. You wouldn't say something. You wouldn't say, it's just a handful of apartment buildings taken over by criminal gangs that were let into the country for some reason. You wouldn't say that. You wouldn't say that if you weren't utterly cynical about your own audience. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. Please like, share, and subscribe. Subscribing really helps me out. I thank you for that. I will see you next time.